Welcome back, friends, to another photo editing tutorial in Luminar NEO. In my last video I spoke about how I was experiencing a bit of a love-hate relationship with Luminar NEO, but I feel I may have actually weighted that slightly more heavily in terms of the things that I felt were missing. So on the flip side, in this one, let me share with you a photo edit I've done of a creative portrait that I really enjoyed. The process... Oh, hello. I may be waving my hands around too much. My watch thinks I'm doing exercise. Anyway, portraits and portrait editing is one thing, but taking things a little bit more creatively is something that I've found that is really easy to do inside of Luminar NEO. So in spite of the issues that I explained in the last video, I still find the process of editing in it very enjoyable. So without further ado, let's get into editing the portrait. So as you can see here, I'm inside the catalogue in Luminar NEO. I've taken some portraits, very varied, but the one I want to choose is this one here because it actually has quite a lot of issues. Straight away I'm going to jump into the develop raw because that is absolutely where I recommend starting your edit. And from develop raw, we're actually able to apply a relevant camera profile. I'm going to drop down the highlights and play with the shadows, but I think really the main thing here is making sure that the highlights are protected and also the whites, just so that I'm keeping all of that detail in the flowers on the top of her hat, her fascinator, and from there we can come in and just select the correct white balance. So we can either do that with the eyedropper or what I did here, which was actually just set a neutral color balance based on what I thought looked right. And if I zoom in here, we're able to set our sharpening. I think Luminar NEO and AI, all the Luminars have a really nice sharpening algorithm. I don't normally play around with the radius and masking too much, but basically I'm just looking at the eye and making sure that I'm happy with the sharpness level that's going on there. Once I'm happy with these adjustments, just by checking the before and after, we're able to shut down the develop raw, look at our overall before and after, and as you can see, we've got a much flatter image with a better color balance, but we now have a good base, a good foundation on which to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is a bit of multiple tool application, and I'm doing this with Structure AI. So what I want to do is bring out a bit of this nice clarity and detail in the image structure, as Luminar calls it, and I'm going to do that by painting it in only where I want it. So I've gone really hard with this, a full 100% amount, and I'm just painting that over areas that I want to bring attention to. So that's over the flowers, that's over the dress, and then a little bit over the background, because there is a lot of detail in the background that I hand painted and I just want to reveal some of that. So hence the reason I'm painting that in with a 30% strength here. So here's our before, here's our after. It's just adding a little bit of pop to the image. But here's the clever thing that we can do with Luminar NEO. You can see there that inside the edits, that structure that I applied was there, but now I'm applying a second structure tool, but this time I'm taking it to a negative direction. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to actually soften and smooth her skin, not to the full extent that you can see here how I had it set to 100, but at 70, that's good. And now I can come in and just paint it over her skin. And when I release that, I'm building this up with a strength again with my brush set to 30%, and I'm just gently painting over her skin. And that's just softening up the pores, and if I want to take it away from areas like her eyes and her lips, I can just come in with the erase. So I'm masking that out now and taking it away. So you can just see here that her skin is nicely softened. Of course, Luminar NEO has a skin softening AI tool built into it, but I'm just wanting to show you guys that there's more ways to skin a cat inside Luminar NEO because of the way that the tools are set up, that we can apply them multiple times. So for example, here I come back into the develop tool. It's no longer develop raw, it's now just develop. So we're not working on the raw version here. We are now working on like a flattened version, and that's why it's really important just to get that base layer looking good. And what I'm doing here is I've just boosted up the exposure because I want to make sure that I'm painting in some highlights into this image. And so this is effectively doing a dodge and burn. I did a global sweep through the image, and now I'm coming in and I'm just painting onto her face areas that I just want to bring highlights to. So the bridge of her nose, her cheek, the areas in her eyes there, just a little bit, and I'm just helping to bring her face out, like enhance that three-dimensional form. And here on her chin, what I'm doing is actually just painting away that darker line. And that's a great thing that you can do with the Dodge and Burn tool, but this is a better way to do it in terms of setting your develop settings and then coming and painting that in, so you're brightening things up. So effectively you're performing a dodge and burn procedure, the dodge and burn technique, but you're doing it in a much more controlled way, because not only can you brighten things up, you can control highlights, shadows, we can be really refined with the adjustment that we want to make. And here I've just set my brush much smaller, and I'm just painting out the very faint lines around her eyes there. I think she'll appreciate me doing that. So if we look at the before and after, it's subtle, but it's just being authentic to her skin. So we're not taking away any of those skin lines or anything, we're just minimizing them, because we don't want our model to look plasticky. We just want an improved skin, a more radiant skin, and that's what we're able to do with this method of dodge and burn. So first of all, I'm dodging, I'm brightening things up, but I'm also going to have a secondary develop layer where I'm going to darken down as well. So once I'm happy with that brightening effect, I'm going to close the develop tool, reopen it, and this time I'm dropping that exposure down. I'm playing with the shadows, seeing if I want to change those at all, and if the saturation is shifting slightly like it did there, which happens sometimes when you shift the exposure or contrast or anything like that, the saturation value of your colors can change. And so again, brilliant, we can come in and actually just reduce that saturation amount until it matches what the underlying layer looked like, so what the saturation of the photo was before we applied that tool. We get that to match, and now I'm able to come in and paint a darkening layer. So I'm saying layers, it's the tool, I'm using multiple tools, but effectively we're layering these edits, we're layering the tools one on top of the other. So here as I go around, I'm just creating a darkening vignette and painting that around our model. So we're darkening that grey background down, and that's going to help to bring our attention to our model, as you can see there. And once I'm happy with the more global refinements of darkening down, I can come in and now I can actually do a more refined darkening pass on her face. So for instance, under her chin there, I don't do a very good job on just darkening that down. I should have feathered that in much better. But anyway, basically I'm looking for areas like her lips where I want to make them just a little bit darker, just so we get more contrast between her skin value and the lip value. Her lip also is slightly wider on the left hand side, so I'm just going around the bottom of her lip on the right hand side, darkening the skin down to actually create the illusion that her lip is just as full on both sides. And then I'm just edging the top of her lip there as well, again just creating more definition and more contrast, just so it just brings her lips out. So if we look at the before and after, we can see that. And this is a good thing with Luminar NEO, we're actually able to jump back in edits. So I've gone back to my brightening layer here, and I'm painting back in around the lips on the brightening layer. And so we can flip-flop between the different tools that we've applied along the way, and if we want to go back and make slight adjustments, we can absolutely do that. So in the brightening layer here, I've decided that the little wrinkles that I had in the canvas that I'd painted as my background, I wanted to remove those. And so if you guys had seen my last video and are using Luminar NEO, you would know that we have no clone and stamp tool at the moment. Maybe it will make an appearance in subsequent versions of it, but at the moment it's not there. So this is a nice little workaround if you want to brighten areas up. So those wrinkles, for example, I'm just painting the lighter parts darker and the darker parts lighter, therefore minimizing that illusion of a fold in the fabric. So basically I'm removing what originally were some lines. So look at our before and after, those lines are disappearing thanks to that painting using that dodge and burn technique. Okay, the area around her chin just there, it's just a little bit dark where it's not illuminated, and that shadow just to the left of her mouth, or right of her mouth, I just want to brighten that up. So again, I'm coming in with a develop tool, I'm brightening things up, I'm boosting up the shadows as well, just to a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with the look of that skin. And when I mask that back in, by selecting a low strength, I'm just at 7 at the moment, and I'm just going to paint this in, overlaying the brush strokes. So there's 7%. I'm going to paint over it again, brighten it up again, and as I build this effect up over and over, we're just brightening that shadow that was there until we're minimizing it. We're not getting rid of it, it's still going to be there, but it's going to be a minimized version of that, so that shadow's just not going to catch our eye as much. So let's have a little look at the before and after. That dark shadow that almost looks like a bruise when you see the before and after, we have minimized that. So if we look at our overall before and after, just with a couple of applications of tools and an overall base development, we're in a pretty good place. Now, I know most of you who are watching this already have Luminar NEO, but if you don't and you think this photo editor looks like it could be a good fit for you and your photo editing, you can use the link in the description below to purchase the software. The team at Skylum who developed this software actually live in the Ukraine, in Kyiv, and so currently they are experiencing unknown atrocities that you are well aware of. So if from what you've seen you think this photo editor looks like a good fit for you, use that link below, and those finances will be helping those guys out in that situation at the moment. Also, I have email communication with these guys, and after my last video I put out a request for you guys to leave messages of support. So if you want to do that in the comments, I'm going to compile those and email them back to the guys at Skylum, just so that they know how much love and support is out there for them. So that would be much appreciated. Anyway, back to the edit. Enhance AI, amazing tool that's been with Luminar for a long time. I will normally throw some accent AI into my edits. I'm just addicted to that tool because it just does so much for us in terms of contrast and saturation improvements, all of that. But I've just gone for a very light application here. And now what I want to do is actually make an improvement for her eyes. Well, that was my initial intention. And so I was just looking at the eyes and wanting to bring more contrast and make sure that the saturation still is respectful of what the saturation was originally. So as I said before, if we boost up the contrast, the saturation can sometimes increase, and so that ability to just ease that back before we come painting in just keeps the whole look a little bit more natural. And so that contrast that I added in before, although it looked really nice through the whole image, I actually really liked that. I've decided just to use that to enhance certain areas of the portrait. And that's one of the key things when you're doing any photo edit. If you're wondering, what do I need to actually change? What do I need to improve here? Just think of the areas that are important in the image. So in this case, in the portrait, it's the eye. Absolutely. Just one eye is shown. We want to be able to draw our viewer's eye into her eye. And as you can see here, I've tried to use some of Luminar's AI to actually improve this eye as well. Sometimes these tools are a little bit heavy-handed, but the eye enhancer, if I can find a place where I've eased that in, and currently we're set at 50, but it's still just a little bit too much. If we just ease that back to a point that we feel happy with, somewhere around 21, that's going to just help her eye pop out a little bit. From here, now I'm happy with the overall portrait in terms of a photographic edit. This is where I can now start getting a little bit more creative. And the high key tool, that's one that's really nice to play around with portraits, and the glow, soft glow, just to soften things off. What I recommend you do with these tools is set it to 100% so you can see the effect, and then go through the different versions of the tools until you find the look that you like. So in this case, I really like that look of the glow tool, and then this is going to enable me to play around, seeing very clearly what changes are going on based on the sliders, because I've set it to 100%. And then when I've got the look that I like, that's when I can come back to that amount slider and ease it off. So in this case, I'm even doing a little bit of color grading by dropping the warmth down. And now if I take the amount away, we can see what our original was, and now I can just move that slider back and forth until I'm happy with the addition of that tool. So the glow tool added in at around 26%, winning. From here we can again always check our before and after, and it's really nice and really satisfying to kind of see where your edit started and where you've got to, and just make sure that you're tracking in the right direction and happy with what you're doing. So that glow effect that I created, as is often the case, I didn't think it was appropriate to apply it to the whole image. I just again want to focus our viewer's eye. I don't need the background to be glowing, but if I can make it glow on our model, that's exactly what we want to be doing. Now you can see here that I've jumped back into the develop section, and the reason is I thought I want to actually start playing with the contrast of the overall image on a global sense, and just start getting the look that I want. So initially I've just made changes to the actual portrait itself that is going to improve the look of that, and now I'm coming in refining the look of the image, the kind of feel of it. And so I'm just playing around with the curve here and creating something that's a bit more dark, a bit more moody, and just seeing what I like the look of. After that initial play around with a contrast curve, I actually ended up deciding, you know what, I'm just going to darken down areas that I don't want our viewer to focus on. And so I just dropped that highlight point on the right hand side of the curve, and that's just going to darken things down without adding contrast. Unlike when you bring the midpoint down, that does add contrast. So just dropping that right hand point down, going to bring the whites out, the highlights, and that's going to darken things down. And now all I'm doing is actually erasing that look from her face. So it's a way of controlling the light. So yeah, absolutely, you want to shoot it right when you're there on site with your light set up and everything. But if we can give our lighting a helping hand in post-production, then why not? So once I've done that, I've come back in, and now we're going for a more contrasty look. I've done that with the overall white curve, and now you can see I'm actually working on the color balance. And there are many ways to do that inside of Luminar, whether it's AI, Luminar NEO, but one of my favorites is curves. Yes, absolutely, it takes a little bit more understanding of curves, and I've done a whole video based around how curves can be used for contrast control and color balance, and I'll link to that in the description below. But it's one of my favorite ways, my favorite way to color grade an image. I really love the way you can control the colors. I just really wanted to enhance the blues and amplify the fact that we've got blue in the hat, the flowers, and bring a little bit of that blue through into that neutral grey background, and then bring the kind of peachy tones, peachy pink of her dress and her flowers and her skin, and unify that. And doing a nice color grade like this is a really nice way to do that. So we've effectively ended up with almost like a dual tone image of a kind of blue and peach. From here, I'm pretty pleased with how things are looking, but to push the creativity a little further, I'm going to use Luminar NEO's layers, and I've just grabbed one of the textures that I shot when I was traveling over in Barcelona. Saw this amazing painterly texture, and I've just dropped it in. Here I'm going to use soft light. Soft light is a really nice one for blending the texture into the image. Particularly if you've got grey tones in your image, it just blends in so nicely. And then you can come in and you can work on that layer. Here I'm just going to drop the opacity down slightly, and then I'm flipping it around using the reflection tools. Reflect horizontally, vertically, see which way I like that texture to sit. And then I'm not a fan of the texture showing up on model's skin, potentially not on the clothes either. And so I'm going to come in and just remove that, particularly from her face at 100%, make sure most of it's gone from her arm, and also remove just how heavy it is from the flowers and the dress as well. And so by having your brush set to a strength much lower than 100%, you're able to build up these changes. And once you're happy with that, you can play with the opacity just to sort of ease it into a point where you feel, yeah, I'm happy with that. Somewhere around that sort of 42 mark, that's nice. But I'm not happy with the overall texture. I want more painterly texture. And so I'm bringing in yet another texture of impasto style painting, a lot of texture within the paint itself. And this is just a normal opacity that I'm doing here, just dropping down so we're seeing through that layer. But you can see as I switch to soft light, it suddenly blends in with the photo. The same with overlay. Overlay is very similar to soft light, but just has a little bit more contrast to it. And so here we go, I'm in overlay, I'm going to find an opacity that I like, and then I'm going to come back to my brush and just paint it in where I want it. Or alternatively use the eraser to erase it from where I don't want it. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, which way you do these things. But in this case, now I'm painting it in. Yeah, just bringing it more into that background so it looks like that background has a nice painterly texture, and I'm letting it bleed over the dress a little bit. In this instance, it might be a little bit too much, guys. Whether or not you want to take your portraits this far and get all creative and turn it more into a painting than a portrait, that's entirely up to you. But I enjoy playing around with these portraits. This isn't a professional endeavor. I'm not trying to sell these as prints, or this is just purely for my enjoyment. And that's one of the big things I'm finding with Luminar NEO for the flaws that I mentioned in my previous video, for things that I think are missing and hopefully will be added soon. Fingers crossed. The actual enjoyment I'm getting from just creatively playing with this, adding layers, adding tools multiple times, it's a very, very enjoyable process. So providing I don't need to clone and stamp things, I'm in a good place. I don't need to see a histogram. My monitor is calibrated well. I know what a white point and a black point is, so I don't even need the histogram. I can do these edits by eye, and particularly when you are doing creative edits such as this, things like histograms don't become irrelevant, but their importance drops down the list a fair bit because you're using your creative eye. So let's look at our before and after. Look at that. That's a big difference. We very much started with a photographic look that had problems. We had bright highlights on the hat. Her face wasn't lit very well. And using that dodge and burn technique, we've created a much better portrait that we've then color corrected. Sorry, not color corrected. I've applied a color grade to it. It's not color correct by any means. It's a deliberate creative choice I've gone for there, and I'm just cropping it down so that I feel that this is a stronger crop. And if you want to change anything in terms of your layer opacity, you can go back in and do that, or any of the tool edits, you can jump back into those as well. So there we have it, guys. We've taken a portrait photo that was okay, had a few issues, and we've taken it through a portrait retouch and a more creative end edit inside of Luminar NEO. Really hope you've enjoyed that. Let me know what you thought of the video and what your favorite tool or application of the tools was. And right now you should see another video popping up around me that Luminar, that YouTube thinks you may enjoy. So why don't you go and click on that, and I'll see you in that video. Thanks so much for watching. Are you still there? When you pause, okay, pause the video, go into the comments and write that comment that I'm going to send to the guys in the Ukraine, in Kyiv, and we're going to send them a message of love, kindness, support, well-wishing, all that good stuff. Please, please do that. It would mean the world to them, I'm sure, and I'm going to send them all these lovely messages. It's the very least we can do.